The congressional hearing room hums with tension as Senator Thompson, a seasoned defender of the public health establishment, locks horns with Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the controversial outsider nominated to lead HHS. For the past hour, Thompson has wielded his decades of experience like a weapon, dismissing Kennedy's calls for transparency as reckless populism. But what Kennedy says next will leave the senator speechless and send shockwaves through Washington. The room falls silent. Camera phones rise in the gallery. This isn't just another hearing. It's about to become the political moment that defines a movement. Hit that like button and subscribe, because you won't believe what happens next. The room buzzes with anticipation as a Senate Oversight Committee hearing on public health transparency unfolds. Cameras are rolling, staffers are scribbling notes, and the gallery is packed. A senior Republican senator, known for his combative style and loyalty to establishment health policies, faces off against Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a controversial figure nominated to lead HIS. The senator has spent the hearing defending the status quo, dismissing Kennedy's calls for reform as radical and unfeasible. But Kennedy is about to turn the tables in a moment that will define the hearing. Senator Thompson, adjusting his glasses, voice dripping with condescension. Mr. Kennedy, I've listened to your testimony today, and I must say I'm deeply concerned about your apparent misunderstanding of how public health agencies operate. For decades, these institutions, CDC, NIH, FDA, have been the gold standard built on rigorous science and expertise. Your proposals for, quote, radical transparency in investigating chronic illness causes sound like populist talking points, not serious policy. As someone who's served on this committee for 15 years, advised by the finest scientific minds, I'd like to know, are you seriously suggesting that our nation's health agencies, which have saved millions of lives, are somehow fundamentally flawed? The room bristles. Thompson's tone suggests he's about to school Kennedy, a tactic he's used to silence critics before. Staffers lean forward, expecting Kennedy to stumble. Mr. Kennedy, leaning into the microphone, voice calm but sharp. Senator Thompson, I appreciate your passion for defending the status quo, but let me ask you something before we dive into your lecture. You've spent 15 years on this committee, surrounded by experts, and I respect that. But how many of those years have you spent talking to parents whose kids can't eat a peanut butter sandwich without going into anaphylactic shock? How many hours have you spent with families bankrupted by diabetes treatments or neurological disorders that didn't exist in your childhood? Or mine? The room goes quiet. Thompson's confident smirk falters slightly. Kennedy's not taking the bait. Kennedy, continuing, his voice steady but rising with intensity. You talk about the gold standard of our health agencies, but let's look at the results. When I was a kid, Senator, I didn't know a single child with a food allergy. Autism was 1 in 10,000. Today it's 1 in 36. Chronic illnesses, diabetes, obesity, rheumatoid arthritis, are skyrocketing. 66% of our kids are struggling with conditions we barely saw a generation ago. You call that a gold standard? I call it a crisis, and the American people deserve to know why. Camera phones rise in the gallery. Democratic staffers shift uncomfortably, while some Republicans nod subtly. Thompson flips through his notes, trying to regain control. Senator Thompson, voice tightening, leaning back. Mr. Kennedy, with all due respect, your anecdotes about allergies and autism don't change the fact that our agencies operate on peer-reviewed science, not emotional appeals. I've got binders full of studies, decades of data, showing the safety and efficacy of our public health policies. You've written books, sure, but they're not exactly peer-reviewed, are they? This isn't about feelings. It's about expertise, something that comes from years of rigorous study, not just lawsuits against agencies you disagree with. The condescension lands like a jab. Thompson's implying Kennedy's advocacy is more about passion than competence. The room tenses, expecting Kennedy to falter. Kennedy, smiling slightly, the kind of smile that signals a trap. Senator, you're absolutely right that expertise matters. But let's talk about what kind of expertise we're discussing here. Yours comes from binders of studies. funded by the same agencies and industries that profit from the status quo. Mine comes from decades of fighting for people who've been ignored by those agencies. Parents, kids, families who've been told their suffering is just bad luck. I've litigated against the FDA, the CDC, the NIH. I've seen their internal documents, their redactions, their talking points. You know what I've learned? When you peel back the curtain, you don't find science. You find corporate capture. The room erupts in murmurs. Thompson's face reddens as Kennedy presses on. Kennedy, voice rising, controlled but relentless. You mentioned my book, Senator. Let's talk about that. I've written 6 of them, not to win awards, but to expose what these agencies won't tell the public. When I request data paid for by taxpayers, I don't get answers. I get white pages, redacted emails, or 17 pages of talking points instead of health alerts. You've sent 70 oversight letters to these agencies and gotten nothing. Why? Because they're not serving the American people. They're serving the interests that keep them funded. Thompson tries to interrupt, but Kennedy doesn't pause. Kennedy. And here's the thing, Senator. This isn't about me or you. It's about our kids. There's no such thing as Republican children or Democratic children. 66% of them are sick, and we're arguing about binders? I'm here because I know what a healthy kid looks like, because I grew up in a world where they weren't the exception. You want to talk about science? Let's talk about why 5 of my own kids have allergies. Let's talk about why autism, diabetes, and depression are exploding. Let's talk about the toxic environment we've allowed to poison our children while agencies you defend look the other way. The hearing room is electric now. Staffers are frantically typing, and the gallery is captivated. Thompson grips the table, his composure cracking. Senator Thompson, voice sharp, desperate to regain control. Mr. Kennedy, you're making bold claims, but this is a serious hearing, not a soapbox. I've advised presidents, worked with top scientists, and helped shape policies that saved lives. Your rhetoric might play well on social media, but it doesn't change the fact that public health requires precision, not populism. You're asking us to dismantle institutions based on what? Your personal crusade? The room goes cold. Thompson's attack is personal, dismissing Kennedy as a populist with a vendetta. It's a risky move, and everyone senses it. Kennedy, standing slowly, voice calm but cutting like a blade. Senator Thompson, you're right. This isn't a soapbox. It's a fight for the soul of our country. You talk about precision and institutions, but let me tell you what I've learned from my personal crusade. I've learned that the American people are tired of being lied to. They're tired of agencies that hide data, redact truth, and protect profits over people. You've advised presidents? I've fought for families who can't get a meeting with those presidents. You've shaped policies? I've seen those policies fail our kids. He leans forward, locking eyes with Thompson. Kennedy. You want to talk about expertise? My expertise comes from 40 years of standing up to the vested interests you defend. It comes from reading the fine print in those redacted emails, from winning lawsuits that forced agencies to admit what they knew. The American people don't need another binder of studies. They need answers. They need transparency. And as HHS Secretary, I'll give it to them. Every document, every study, every truth paid for by their taxes. Because the real experts aren't the ones in your binders, Senator. They're the parents fighting for their kids, the doctors who see the truth, the 63,000 Americans, Democrats and Republicans, who signed letters begging us to fix this. The room is dead silent. Kennedy pauses, letting his words sink in. Kennedy, delivering the final blow. So yes, Senator, you're right. Public health requires precision, but it also requires courage. Courage to admit when we're wrong. Courage to ask why our kids are sicker than ever. Courage to put people over profits. You've had 15 years to show that courage. Forgive me if I'm not impressed by your results. The American people deserve better, and I'm here to deliver it. The room erupts in a stunned murmur. Camera phones are raised high, capturing the moment. Thompson's face is frozen, his mouth slightly open, no words coming out. His hands clutch his binder, but he's speechless. Kennedy sits back, calm but resolute, As the gallery buzzes with whispers of a political earthquake, staffers scramble to post clips to X, knowing this exchange will dominate headlines for weeks.
And there it was, a moment that shook the Senate to its core. Mr. Kennedy, the outsider who'd spent decades fighting the system, had just dismantled one of its staunchest defenders. This wasn't just a hearing. This was a battle for truth, transparency, and the future of our kids. So if you believe the truth deserves a voice, smash that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe. Because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.